Rafa Santos grew up in a tiny coastal village in the Philippines where every day felt like a test of survival, yet he carried a quiet strength that made people stop and listen whenever he sang. His home was a small wooden hut with thin walls that shook whenever the wind grew strong, and nights were often spent with candles or a kerosene lamp because electricity wasn't always reliable. His mother sold vegetables at the local market, waking up at dawn and working until her feet ached, while his father picked up whatever job he could find, repairing boats, cleaning nets, helping fishermen, anything to put food on the table. Even though money was always tight, Rafa never complained. He would hum to himself while carrying buckets of water, sing while helping his mother pack vegetables, and belt out high notes while sweeping outside their home. Music didn't just make him happy, it made him feel alive. One afternoon, while singing on the street to help his mother attract customers, a foreign tourist walking through the village stopped in his tracks and began recording Rafa on his phone. The boy didn't think much of it, he just kept singing as the breeze blew through his hair and children gathered around him. But that video would change everything. Within days, it spread online, thousands of shares, millions of views, comments in languages Rafa couldn't even read. People from around the world were stunned by the tiny Filipino boy with the giant voice. A charity group in the United States reached out, offering him the chance to audition for America's Got Talent, something he had only seen on old TV clips. The idea felt impossible, like a dream meant for other kids, not someone who grew up singing barefoot on the streets. But his parents insisted he go. They believed in him even more than he believed in himself. With borrowed clothes, a donated plane ticket, and blessings from their whole village, Rafa stepped onto a plane for the first time, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. When he landed in America, the buildings seemed too tall, the streets too big, and everything felt like a world far beyond anything he had known. Yet he reminded himself why he came, to help his family and show that even poor kids deserve a chance. When Rafa finally walked onto the America's Got Talent stage, he felt his legs shake beneath him. The lights were blinding, and the audience stretched farther than anything his eyes had ever taken in. Simon Cowell leaned forward, studying him carefully, and asked why he was here. Rafa swallowed hard and said softly, "To help my family, and to show that even poor kids can dream big." There was a stillness in the theater as the music started. At first, his voice trembled, but when he remembered singing under the kerosene lamp back home, something inside him clicked. His voice grew stronger, smoother, richer, each note filled with every hardship he had lived through and every hope he carried. People in the audience began wiping their tears. Some held their hands to their chest, stunned by the emotional power of his voice. As he reached the final high note, the entire crowd stood in unison, clapping and shouting. Rafa covered his face, overwhelmed, crying because he never imagined he would receive that kind of reaction. Simon smiled and said, "This is why we make this show." That was pure magic. All 4 judges gave him a yes, and that moment, captured on camera, replayed around the world, was the beginning of a journey that would shake the AGT stage and change Rafa's life forever. When Rafa returned for the judge cuts, the pressure felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. The excitement from his audition was now replaced by a fear that whispered constantly in his ear, what if his first performance was just luck? What if he couldn't repeat that magic? What if America forgot about him as quickly as they had discovered him? Back home, his entire village gathered again around the same small TV, waiting to see their boy take the stage. He imagined their faces, kids sitting on the dirt floor, mothers with towels around their shoulders from cooking, fishermen pausing their evening routines, everyone rooting for him. That image brought a tremble to his hands as he stood backstage watching other talented contestants perform. The competition suddenly felt real, full of dancers, acrobats, choirs, and singers with rich backgrounds and training he never had. He felt small, like he didn't belong, like he might be swallowed by the weight of expectations. When his name was finally called, Rafa took a deep breath and walked out into the light. He chose a classic American power ballad, something far more challenging than what he'd done before. The judges raised their eyebrows at the song choice, and even the audience murmured, unsure if a young boy with no formal training could pull off something so vocally demanding. Rafa closed his eyes as the first notes of the accompaniment started. He pictured his mother telling him, "Anik, courage isn't being fearless. It's singing even when your voice shakes." As he opened his mouth, the trembling returned for a brief second, but then the emotion poured out with a force that even surprised him. His voice climbed with strength, dipped softly with vulnerability, and soared during the chorus, filling the theater with the kind of raw passion only someone who had lived through struggle could deliver. The guest judge covered her mouth as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. When the final note hit, it hung in the air like a held breath before the audience erupted. It wasn't just applause, it was a release of emotion, admiration, and disbelief. The judges praised him, with Simon saying, "That didn't feel like a performance. It felt like someone telling his truth." When Rafa heard he was moving on to the live shows, he broke down backstage, overwhelmed by relief and joy. In that moment, he realized his journey was no longer just about singing, it was about proving that courage can come from the humblest places. Entering the live shows brought an entirely new level of pressure. Rafa felt the weight of millions of viewers watching from across America, along with people from around the world who had fallen in love with his story. The AGT stage looked bigger, the lights brighter, and everything felt more serious. Producers rushed backstage, cameras followed him everywhere, and the knowledge that every single note mattered made his heart race. For this round, Rafa chose a song that reminded him of his father, one that carried themes of sacrifice, struggle, and the quiet love of a man who had worked through storms and sleepless nights to take care of his family. As he stood waiting for his cue, his legs felt weak, but he reminded himself who he was singing for. When the curtains opened, a montage played behind him, images of fishing boats rocked by waves, his mother cooking in their small kitchen, children running barefoot through the village, all pieces of his life stitched together in a way that tugged at the heart of every viewer. Rafa began softly, letting the sadness of the song seep through each line, but as the music swelled, his voice rose with a power that seemed impossible for a boy his size. The audience stood before he even finished the song, cheering him on through the final seconds. When he hit the last note, the crowd exploded into applause. The judges praised his emotional depth, with Heidi saying, "You don't sing songs, you live inside them," and Sophia telling him, "You make every mother want to hug their child tighter." The votes came in, and Rafa advanced once again. It wasn't just a victory, it was proof that his voice, his heart, and his story were impacting millions. As Rafa stepped into the semi-final week, the pressure began to feel like a storm constantly circling over his head. His sudden rise to fame brought interviews, media attention, rehearsals, photo shoots, and endless strangers wanting to meet him. For a boy who grew up in a quiet village by the sea, it was overwhelming. Some nights, he lay awake in his hotel bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was truly good enough, wondering if people were expecting too much from him. He missed his mother's voice telling him to rest, his father's tired laugh after work, and the comfort of knowing he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. The other contestants seemed confident and polished, while Rafa felt like he was barely holding himself together. His throat tightened every time someone said, "You're the favorite to win." It sounded like praise, but to him it felt like pressure pushing him farther from the simple joy of singing. Then, backstage one afternoon after a tough rehearsal, Rafa received a surprise, an emotional video message from his entire village. The screen showed familiar faces pressed together, smiling and waving. Children jumped in front, holding hand-painted signs that read, "Go Rafa" and "Our champion." His mother appeared, her eyes teary, saying, "Anik, we are proud of you no matter what. Just sing with your heart." His father, standing beside her with calloused hands and a shy smile, added, "You already won for us." That moment cracked open something inside Rafa. All the fear that had been tightening around his confidence loosened. He wiped his tears and whispered, "For them, I will do this for them." For the semi-finals, Rafa chose the most difficult song of his life, a powerful anthem known for its high notes and emotional intensity. The choice shocked the judges, but Rafa knew he had to show America everything he had, even if it scared him. When he walked on stage, the theater lights felt warmer, not intimidating. He held the microphone close, closed his eyes, and let the music carry him. His voice quivered on the opening line, but as he reached the first chorus, strength surged through him. Each note soared higher, clearer, more confident. The audience leaned forward, captivated. By the bridge, he hit a note so pure and strong that even the cameramen paused in disbelief. When the final chorus burst forth, Rafa sang with every memory, every prayer, every sacrifice his parents had ever made. The crowd leapt to their feet before he could even finish. Simon shook his head like he couldn't believe what he had witnessed, and the performance trended worldwide within minutes. When the votes were announced and Rafa was sent to the grand finale, he didn't scream or celebrate wildly, he simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, God." Finale night felt like a dream. The stage was larger, the production grander, the air electric with anticipation. Rafa stood backstage listening to the roar of the audience, feeling his heart thump like a drum inside his chest. He knew this was his moment, the moment that could change everything for his family. Instead of choosing a technically difficult song, he picked one with a message, something that spoke to children living in poverty, to kids who felt unseen, unheard, and underestimated. He wanted his performance to be a voice for all of them, not just himself. When the spotlight hit him, Rafa stepped forward and began singing softly, almost like a whisper shared with the world. The theater fell completely silent. As the orchestra built behind him, his voice climbed with emotional force, filled with truth and vulnerability. Every note seemed to glow with sincerity. The screen behind him showed images of children from around the world, kids walking barefoot to school, families living in small homes, villages lit by candles at night, all meant to reflect Rafa's own journey. Halfway through the song, the audience began standing, unable to sit through the intensity of what they were hearing. By the time he reached the final note, a long, powerful high tone that echoed like a prayer, the entire theater was already on its feet, clapping and cheering with a volume that shook the room. The judges praised him with heartfelt admiration. Sophia told him, "You are the soul of this season," while Heidi said, "You sing like someone